Hey everyone, we are so excited to the reaction in the community for the pod. I need to take a moment of your time to tell you to please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or hit the follow button on Spotify. We are in the humble beginning stage of our show and establishing a listener base is of paramount importance and will help us determine the frequency of future episodes. Thanks and enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to Neuse Little Podcast, an audio program discussing the almost 50-year history of Neuse Little Theatre and the backstage antics and stories that come along with running a community theater in a small town. I'm your host, Matt Gore, and we are coming to you from NLT's stage and base of operations, the little log cabin located on the banks of the Neuse River in Smithfield, North Carolina. We lovingly refer to it as the Hut. Our 46th season, along with virtually every other community theater season in our state, has been postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and in the meantime, we thought we could provide you with a little additional content. We're coming to you from a rainy evening in Smithfield, North Carolina. If you hear some slight alteration in the sound in the background, that is the sound of rain hitting a tin roof. Now, in person, that is one of the most soothing sounds you will ever hear, but over a digital audio program might not have the best quality, so if you'll forgive us for that, we're doing our best. Now, sitting here with me today is someone relatively new to NLT. You know, why would I do a new member, you ask? Well, I wanted to get their perspective, first of all, because even though they are new, they are involved very heavily with productions for the past 3 years. 3 years. So, for the past 3 years, whenever I'm here for a production or something, I usually see the man sitting across the table from me today, and I'm very happy to introduce to you Rick Herndon. How you doing, Rick?
Fine, thank you.
Now, I first knew you because I worked with you on Double Wide Texas, and you had started working with Steven as an assistant stage manager at that point, and I knew immediately that you were just a great fit for here. And did you feel that when you came here initially?
Well, when I came initially, I had no idea, I didn't know anything about the theater here. I had just actually moved here, and the very next week, they had rehearsals or auditions for Bloom, which Mita was directing. And because I didn't know anything about the theater, I just showed up. I didn't really expect to be in the play, but I didn't know how to get involved. So I just showed up. I think it was the second night of the auditions, and stood on stage and cold read. I didn't even know what the play was about. And so it was just, I just came down here because I wanted to be involved in a small town and a small theater.
Yes, Bloom was directed by our very own Mita Toole, and who was that written by, Mita? Do you remember?
Oh, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up.
Well,
That was like 3 years ago. I don't
Yes,
remember.
what was that play about, briefly?
It was a gentleman who lived in the urban setting. It was kind of like Detroit or Flint, Michigan,
yeah.
or someplace like that, and
Yeah,
urban
Flint, Michigan.
decay, and people had moved out of the neighborhood and things had fallen apart, and so he was taking empty lots. He was working with the city to take empty lots and grow food for the community. And his daughter was a social worker, and she brought one of her troubled kids, and he takes the kid under his wing and helps him out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful little play, and features great performances by Sammy Smith and Nicole Braswell, and I know and the boy, and I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I forgot your name, buddy. I'm sorry, but
George something, but
he,
yeah.
he was very good. Now, even though you didn't get cast, correct?
Correct.
You still wanted to be involved.
Right, so I didn't get cast, but Mita I'd put on the little application or info card that I was interested in doing anything I could do to be involved. So Mita sent me an email, I think, or text, and said, come on down on Saturday mornings, we're building sets. So I came down and met Steven for the first time, And we were actually building the set for Bloom, and we had to build a turntable. And I'm not really carpenter inclined, but we just jumped in the middle of it, and Stephen's so good at building things and coming up with great ideas, how something works mechanically, that it was a joy to see and watch and be a part of just everything coming together on a small stage.
The turntable is something that is a semi-recent thing we've implemented at NLT. First done, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in Death of a Salesman.
Yep, that was where we got the idea from.
Yeah.
Well, we'd had turning sets before, but Randy Jordan came in and said, I know how to make a turntable work. And instead of putting the casters on the bottom of your platform and getting the platform to turn, you put the casters upside down and you lay the platform on top of it, so it's like a lazy Susan rather than a rolling platform, and it works so much better.
It really does. It's easy to turn even with people on it.
Yes.
We used actually 3 of them in Witness for the Prosecution, and one large one and 2 smaller. And we had actually turned, I think, with 5 people on one of them, the large one at one point.
Yeah.
And it took 2 people, maybe 3, to turn it around.
Yeah. I was on it, and I was in Death of a Salesman. I was in one scene as Willie's boss, and I remember every time on that turntable going like, "All right, it's about to turn. It's about to turn. All right, Matt, it's about to turn. Don't get distracted." And then I'm like, "Okay, where's that prop for my? It's turning!" And then I'm like, "Oh shit!" And then because I'll lose my balance. But every night it was fine. But yeah, almost. I remember Steven laughing. Clearly, one time I was just like, it's about to turn, it's about to turn, it's about to turn. Where's that thing from? Like, oh, come on,
Yeah, you had to have your sea legs.
Yeah, and one of the funny things about it is that you don't know in the dark when you're supposed to stop turning.
Yeah.
And so we had glow in the dark tape, and sometimes we'd miss it. It's like, where's the damn tape? It's like trying to find it. It's like then you're like trying to pull back because you realize you've gone 3 inches too far. So it was every night was a challenge to get that just right.
Well, we've gotten much better at it as we've gone along.
Well, Witness for the Prosecution was because we had the 3 of them, they had to line up. That was what made that one difficult. When it's just the one, you kind of, you can kind of fudge it a little bit here and there. But no, with Witness for the Prosecution, they actually had to, like, if you did it too far, you ended up with a gap you could see backstage.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yep. And we'll circle back to Witness for the Prosecution because you were actually, was that your first time on stage, Witness?
Yes.
We're going to circle back to that because I remember something specifically about your performance, but we'll go back. Now, what were your first impressions of Stephen when you got here? Stephen, our loving stage manager, Stephen Roberts, gruff on the outside but inside, one of the best people you'll meet.
Yeah. Well, my first impression was just he was more stoic than I was kind of used to.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't really show like emotion very much or very often. At least I haven't seen it a lot. So I didn't really know. I'm kind of empathic in a way. I'm always trying to read people, and so Stephen's very hard to read.
I agree.
So you're not sure sometimes if he's angry or not, or so you're kind of guarded in your approach to him because you're like not quite sure what kind of reaction you'll get. So that was my first reaction to Stephen, but we worked along well. I mean, just once you realize that every time, certain people don't respond the way other people do, and Stephen has his own way of responding that works.
It does. It works. He's been doing it for a long time here. I mean, right?
2006, 2007, I think is when he started. He was here. He came on with Sunshine Boys. We started dating in 2008, and he came here at least a year, maybe 2, before we started officially dating. So yeah, right around 2006, 2007.
But he's amazing to watch.
He is.
When you come up with a mechanical issue or technical issue on stage, I mean, his brain is so quick. It's like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. And you're like, oh, okay. I mean, one night I think I forgot what show it was, but no, the sound wasn't working, and we're like 5 minutes before curtain, And so Stephen's like running around. Next thing you know, it's fixed. Stephen fixed it. It was like, I wouldn't even know where to start.
That's you always go to for that.
Anytime there's a connection somewhere that you have to dig around and find, that was probably what it was. I usually go, Steven, can you go check the microphone cable? Or can you go check the so-and-so? So yeah, he's very good for climbing tall things and getting up high or crawling underneath things.
Nimble man.
Or walking a ladder.
Sinewy.
The first time I ever saw someone walk a ladder.
Yeah.
Basically stand on the top two rungs and walk the thing across the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen. He'll stand on the very, very top of an A-frame ladder, and then use his hands at the bottom of the top of the ladder and just slide it to tilt it across the floor. Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yep.
I'm so used to it, I don't even
You
realize,
don't
like,
think
whatever. But he likes to pull that trick on new people just to see them go,
Oh my gosh.
So you're saying he's a little conscious of it.
oh yeah. And see, he works on ladders for a living,
Right,
and
right.
OSHA would kick him, if he did that on the job, so he gets a kick out of doing it here.
Well, there have been a few times where I have to look away because, there's a rope hanging at the very apex of this building, and he climbed up there to get it off because we had thrown a weight up there and got it to go over. But I had to look away. I could not look at him because of this fear that I have of heights.
He's pretty fearless about being up high. It drives me crazy, and just there are times when he freaks me out, and I see him do it all the time. But it doesn't seem to. I mean, he's had a couple of moments where he was a little, made him like cringe a little bit. But all in all, he tends to be a little more.
He's fearless.
Yeah, a little more.
Willing to take those risks.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was trying to find. There's a word, but I can't find it in my head. So there you go.
Now, so what made you decide to stick with it after meeting Steven, working on the set? What made you think like, you know what, I want to stick around?
Well, I started meeting people after the initial stage building, meeting the actors, and realizing there was a lot of talent here. I'd spent 23 years in D.C., where there's a lot of community theater, and so I got to see theater for the 23 years I was there, and you've got some quality actors in a large city like that, in a metropolitan area, and so I didn't know what to expect here, and I realized that there's incredible talent in a small town the size of 12,000, and to have a theater in a small town like that is so well established, and with a population that generates actors to keep coming back, season after season, that's pretty amazing when you think about it. And these people are not related in any way. They didn't go to school together. Some of them grew up together, but most of them didn't.
Yeah.
But yet they have
a lot of the beginning members did, but yeah, the later people, yeah, it's all a mixed match.
Yeah, and they're cohesive, and they work together, and they keep it going year after year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we try, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, going back, you mentioned that you worked in Washington, D.C. for 23 years?
Yes.
What'd you do there?
I was an attorney with the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Okay. That's where your science background comes from.
Yes. Well, I have a degree in biology and then in chemistry.
Oh, okay.
So I was able to kind of use that as I moved forward after law school, and that was a good fit because I did work in biotechnology. I worked with the Department of Justice on every kind of case you can imagine that was filed against the department for some type of alleged wrongdoing. And we also prosecuted people for food safety issues and for importing illegally things that are disease risks to the agriculture here, whether it be animals or plant diseases. So like mad cow disease, for example, working on those issues. So all of them were pretty national in scope. And so I got a really good, I guess, exposure to national and international issues. And we worked with Congress to write bills and certain laws that affect agriculture.
Well, yeah, this all goes to say never ever judge a book by its cover because when I first met Rick, I knew he was intelligent. I knew Rick was intelligent right away just from the way he spoke and carried himself. But I had no idea he had this crazy background, and you're a lawyer, plus you got these degrees and all that. I knew there was a very intelligent mind at work. But you come off as very sort of soft and yeah, very much an empath and soft spoken and very nice. But you're actually a very fascinating person. That's why part of the reason why I wanted to get you in here today was really like, who is this Rick Herndon guy? But so going back, you say where are you from?
I'm from Mississippi, northeast part of Mississippi, about 30 miles south of the University of Mississippi.
Oh, okay. What was it like growing up as a boy in Mississippi?
Well, I grew up in a town of 2,000, so I'm used to small town life. But it was different, going to D.C. after having grown up in Mississippi. It's just a very different world. I would like to say in some places growing up in a small town, you're kind of actually 20 years behind, like a metropolitan area as far as the way people think, the way people live. We had running water, electricity.
Right, you're talking about social.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, when I moved to D.C., people would still question, like, well, did y'all have electricity? And it's like, well, I can honestly say that I've used an outhouse.
Okay.
My dad's sister didn't have a bathroom until 1968 when I was 6 years old. So I have used an outhouse. I do know what it is. And I know people who had outhouses growing up. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I go back pretty regularly. I have a mother who's disabled, and I go back to check in on her and make sure things are going well with her. And what's interesting about where I grew up is, of the 92 people in my high school class, 41 of us started first grade together.
Wow.
So we knew each other all 12 years. And I was also the very first year of integration in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of a unique experience because it was kind of phased in, integration in Mississippi. So it started actually out with the first 5 grades. And then the next year it progressed to the entire school. So I had an older brother who was 11 years older than me. He was a senior and I was at first grade. And so he didn't experience integration, but I did. Mm-hmm. So it was the norm when I started first grade.
At what point did you decide to go to Washington D.C. and pursue the legal aspect of this science path?
Well, I started out in a private firm working in insurance defense. So we defended car accidents, medical malpractice, things like that. But I wasn't happy there. I saw the partnership track, and I saw the people and their lives on the partnership track, and I knew that I wouldn't have much of a life, and I just didn't feel like I fit in. Mm. So I started looking for something else. So I left there and went to work for a private attorney on the plaintiff side. So we actually filed the lawsuits for car accidents, and I didn't feel like it was a good fit there. So there was actually an opening with USDA there in Jackson, but it had nothing to do with science. It was bankruptcies and foreclosures. And so I had to do that for 3 years. And it was a very sad situation for so many small farmers, having their land foreclosed on that had been in their families for generations. But all these farm loans had been made, I think during the Carter administration, that were unsecured. They had no collateral, except for their farms. And so they were failing right and left. This is, about 1990, 91. And so we literally had hundreds of foreclosures across the state. They were just basically coming in by the truckload every day. These files that had been started by these local administrators to foreclose on these loans. So we had to work with the Department of Justice to actually respond to these bankruptcy cases. So I did that for 3 years, and it was really a wake-up call to me and how hard it is to be a farmer in this country, to actually start off and actually to continue a farm that's been operable for 50, 60 years and to keep it in the family. So, but then they were going to close their office in Jackson, and I had a choice. I could either go to Montgomery, Alabama, and continue kind of doing what I was doing, or working with a division within our office that worked on food safety and biology issues. So it was like, it was a no-brainer. But I never had any concept of going to Washington to work. So I went, didn't know a soul. The government paid for me to move there. And I just kind of clicked with the new job and felt right at home.
Well, and you stayed there for 23, you stayed there in Washington for 23 years.
Yes.
And so you decided to retire, and what made you come to North Carolina?
Well, my partner is from here, and we wanted to be closer to his family because they're older. Had two sisters who died 2 years before we moved here, and they were close to 90, and his rest of his family are in advanced stage. So I wanted him to be able to spend his rest of his time with his family, and it put me about 5 hours closer to my family. And we wanted to live, in a small town. A theater was a must. And so we started looking. We looked at Pittsburgh, we looked at Cary, we looked at Raleigh, we looked at Durham, and we came back here because Silas, that's his name, has a niece who lives 10 miles east of here. And then the rest of his family lives within 30 miles. The entire family now lives within 30 miles, and they have lived within 30 miles for his whole life. And then, except for one cousin who lives in New Jersey. So.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Well, I want to say that cousin is Lee Meredith, the movie star.
Oh, really?
Yes, who was in Producers.
Oh, wow.
So that's the only family member that left, but she became a Rockette. And then she went on Broadway.
So she was in the musical.
The Producers.
The version of the Producers.
Yes, she played the German blonde, who was the secretary in the movie.
Okay, so we're talking about the more updated version, right?
We're talking
Not
about
the 60s version. Are
60s.
we talking about the 60s version?
Yes.
Okay, with the Mel Brooks film version.
Yes.
With Gene Wilder and Zero Mostel.
Yes.
Okay, wow. Okay.
I'm pretty sure. I may be wrong. But she started out as a Rockette.
Because there's been so many different adaptations of the Producers.
Yeah. Mita can maybe look it up. Lee is actually married another actor and a producer, and they raised their children in New Jersey, and so they would come back every summer and spend with Silas, and but they were the only kind of family unit within the larger family who actually moved away.
Yeah. So circling back to the conversation. For Witness for the Prosecution that I was talking about earlier, Witness for the Prosecution by Agatha Christie, directed by Sean Braswell and Mita Toole. And what part did you play in that?
I was a British Bobby police officer.
Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because you pretty much did what in that play, sir?
I pretty much stood stoically, with keeping my eye on the defendant to make sure he didn't escape from his little stand, and just keep order in the court, bring the witnesses out one by one.
Well, I'll tell you, my two memories from Witness of the Prosecution. My three memories of Witness for the Prosecution was the poor dude's pants, number one.
Oh, yes.
When I was here watching it, I was sitting in the audience, and he takes a chair center stage and turns the back of the chair to the audience, and he straddles the chair. And when he straddled that chair, one entire side of his pants just ripped real good.
From like ankle to thigh, basically.
And we were all just going like, oh. And because we all heard it and we all saw it, and he just was like deer in headlights. Like,
yeah.
And so he goes like, you know what? I got to go to the bathroom. And then we could hear him go boom, 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 down the stairs, and then shut the door and stuff back. And poor Eric House was shuffling papers on that stage there. he was still in it. God love him. He was in there, and he was shuffling papers, and then finally, boom, 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 boom. I'm back, and he had totally different pants on.
And we had no idea what had happened. I was standing over behind the.
From your perspective, what you had no idea what was going on?
Had no idea.
Where was Stephen near you?
I think Stephen was either outside the door or just inside the door. But I remember looking at him and going, what? And so it wasn't until actually he made it back up that we realized, or someone told us, that he had split his pants. And not just split your pants, like literally.
Ruined those pants.
From seam to seam.
No, those pants cannot be used anymore.
Right.
There was no hiding it.
Yes.
Oh, I haven't thought about that in a while. Now, from your perspective, Mita, when did you hear about this?
Oh, I think I was on the porch. I might have been with Steven when it happened, because we were outside. I was outside because once the show starts, and a lot of times I'll wander off and I'll be here for my actors, but I don't need to see it again. So I'm usually doing something else unless I need to be in the booth or something like that. But I just remember, I think Steven came over laughing. And he may have been intermission even when he did it. I said, "What is wrong with you?" He goes, he said, "Your boy split his pants." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes like, I said, "So was it noticeable?" He goes,
"Oh yeah,
oh yes."
They noticed.
But I can imagine Eric standing there by himself, and I think actually someone made the phone ring. And Mike Rumble maybe.
Yeah,
it was Mike and Eric. Yeah, it was him and Eric.
I think Mike came in, and Patsy may have came in and asked, "Do you want to have tea?" And they were covering as hard as they could.
It felt like 5 minutes, but in true stage time, it was like
5 minutes, but it was a long time.
It was probably like 2 or 3 minutes, but it felt like forever. Where they were just like running and just ignoring the fact that this kid was changing his pants and just like it's just a normal day.
I think Eric says he didn't know why he did it.
Yeah,
he just got up and left the stage, and Eric's like, I don't know why he left.
Yeah, I believe him in the moment because his back was to him.
Yeah.
The dude's back, because he was really downstage center. It could not, if you staged it, it couldn't have been worse. If you staged it as a joke, it couldn't have been worse, because it was downstage center with a chair. He turned the chair around, and then he sat in that chair, and I was like, and then boom, I was just like, oh man.
It's in moments like that you realize how talented and quick-witted actors can be. Because I mean, they covered, and most of the audience, well, they saw it happen, but if they hadn't seen it happen, they wouldn't really have known what happened. But I think a lot of people in the first few rows actually saw what happened.
The audience knows, and they were good sports about it. They started to titter a little bit, but they were good sports about it. They kind of saw what the deal was. And then my other two memories of that, before we made that digression, was two performances was Nicole and you, because I thought y'all guys had difficult performances, but that weren't showy in any way. She had to be the stenographer and type the whole time, and you had to be the Bobby that was stoic and just sat prone the whole time, and that can be hard.
Yes, one of the funniest parts for me, actually, the defendant was sitting on the stand, the witness stand, and I had to stand behind him while he was arguing with the prosecuting attorney, and they were right in each other's face, and I'm like literally right behind them, and they're like right left, and I'm trying not to even react.
Right.
My job is to be there, so it's like don't shift, don't move your eyes. So it worked, but it was hard just to stand there and not, because each night was different.
Yeah.
They're a different posture, or they might be in just a little bit different place, and you're just trying to stay out of the way, and watch what's going on.
Yeah, as it's not as like a background character trying to keep your, because I hate it. I hate it when background characters overact. That's like a pet peeve of a director of mine. Like, even in movies when I'm watching, like there's supposed to be a moment where there's an extra trying to show off in the background. I'm like, oh, she just ruined this entire tape. She ruined all these people's hard work because she wanted to take, this is my moment, this is my moment. I'm like, no, it's not. And so whenever there's a background extra that kind of goes over the top, that's a director's pet peeve of mine. And y'all did not, and y'all did it perfectly. That's why I remember it, because whenever that does, then it just sticks in my craw. So you moved on from that, and What was next after Witness for the Prosecution?
Well, there were, I think, the rest of the season, then this past season, they were going to do Mamma Mia. And I had felt comfortable enough, I think at that point, to actually be on stage. I hadn't been on stage since I was a senior in high school. And I played Nathan Detroit in Guys and Dolls. And so I really enjoy singing. And I love musicals. So that was, I just kind of took a leap of faith and came up and tried out for that. And got cast as Bill, one of the potential fathers of the young lady.
So now tell me about working with the people on that. There's a lot of really good people that worked on that production. Like Greg Hill, and Ruth was the director.
Right, Mary Lee.
Yeah, Annabeth. And who was Michael the music director? Not Michael.
No, Todd Johnson.
Todd Johnson. I always say Michael. Sorry, Todd. So what was it like working on that?
Well, there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
I mean, the stage here is pretty small compared to a lot of other stages. So we had over 30, I think, people on stage at one point, or close to 30.
I think it was 28.
28?
Yeah.
I think it whittled down to 28, if I remember correctly. But it could be. It was somewhere in the 20s for sure.
And there were several scenes where everybody was on the stage.
Pushing the very limits of the amount of people we could have
Yes,
on this stage.
and so
We've
there
had
was
44 kids on this stage.
You
It's
think?
all good.
Yeah.
Oh, for summer camp, yeah, we've had 44 kids on this stage.
Okay. I stand corrected.
We had 32 in Midsummer Night's Dream
At one time?
at one time. You guys were all on the stage for the finale part of that show.
Was it all the characters? Okay, I think you're right, actually. Oh, for the dance.
Yes.
The dance. You're right. You're right.
So
Well,
it
there was-
wasn't the most, but it was the most grown people because there were kids in Midsummer. So yes, as far as full-size adults were, Mamma Mia was the biggest cast.
Which some people might say is worse than having the 44 kids.
Well, I had no idea that we were going to pull this off because with that many people and that many scenes and the choreography that Patsy did, and so many people being on stage, I mean, I was in the back at one dance sequence and I literally had no room. I had to like just shuffle this way and shuffle that way. But in reality, we were supposed to take 8 steps this way and 8 steps this way. And so literally I was just kind of confined to this little area and just made my moves without actually moving. So it was that tight on stage. But it all came together. I mean,
What was it like working with Greg Hill?
Oh, Craig's a riot.
Yeah, Greg is another one of our relatively, he's been doing it for about 2 or 3 years now. Same time as you. He got almost the same time.
Yeah, a few months after.
Yeah.
And I think he just kind of showed up one day too.
Yep.
And wanted to get involved and volunteered to do some stuff. And he's much more mechanically inclined than I am, so he
Yes.
kind of does more of the building stuff.
Yeah, he's a little project guy. He likes to take little projects. He did the safe door for me when we did safe, and that was just an amazing piece of set decoration. And we're gonna get him on here and talk about all that probably after this pandemic has passed us by. So it might be a little while, but we're gonna get Greg on here eventually for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing about Greg is he can visualize things that you would have no idea how to convert something into something.
Absolutely.
The door, the safe door, to look at a swimming pool, a kid's swimming pool, go, oh, safe door. That's freaky. I mean,
Yeah.
he can do that.
And not only can he do that, he can design it and then execute it.
Yes.
Well, and that's
Yes.
entirely different set of skills. When I looked at a safe door, I'm like, wow, I felt so spoiled.
Yes.
I felt incredibly spoiled. I'm like, wow, this took you a lot of time. So
Plus,
and-
he's talented. I mean, he's a talented actor.
yeah. He's an incredibly talented actor. Greg's one of the most talented dudes I know, pound for pound. That's for sure. Okay, and unfortunately, something happened in the rehearsal process of Mamma Mia that caused you to unfortunately give up the role. Talk to us about that.
Well, it was the very first night of dress rehearsals. It was a Monday night, and I wasn't feeling well. I thought I just had indigestion, And it kept getting worse, and I started having some pains. And so Patsy gave me, I think, some Gas-X or something, backstage. I thought maybe that would help, but it didn't. So I went home after the dress rehearsal, and I was up all night. And about 7:30 in the morning, I was like, I've got to go to the hospital. Something's wrong. So I went, and they're like, oh, you've got probably a ruptured appendix. We got to get you in emergency. So went to the emergency room and put me through, did the surgery almost immediately. And I woke up and they're like, surgery's done. I'm like, oh, okay, great. They're like, well, you can go home probably tomorrow. I'm like, okay. So they're like, here, eat something. So I ate something, and something didn't feel right. And it turns out that everything was coming back the opposite way than it should have been. So I had this thing called an ileus, which is a blockage of the intestine that's caused in my situation where it just, because of anesthesia and trauma to the area, it just shuts down. So like a foot of it doesn't move. And so, peristaltic motion, with the intestine, how things are forced, well, it stops. So nothing moves either way, except things start backing up. So I spent 8 days in the hospital because they wouldn't let me go home until it had resolved itself. So 8 days later, so I missed the opening weekend of Mamma Mia, and I didn't get out till the following Wednesday. So I couldn't risk trying to step back in, not knowing what I was going to be like over the next week or so. So Sean Braswell came in literally the very next day, I believe, and started, taking over the role and learning it.
Yeah, we went into that a while back on the podcast, and we all know that Sean pulled it off very well.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. But for you, if you're in your position, that must have been tough, because I'm sure you worked very hard on it.
Right.
Everybody worked very hard on that show, I'm sure.
And plus, you don't want to get a reputation of not following through on something.
Oh, well, okay.
It was really rough being there and knowing the work everyone did. And at the time when I went in, I really expected I would be out.
Well, there's being dedicated and there's being dumb, and
yes,
and yes, and I'm one of those people too. Like if I'm not, in a hospital bed or dead, I'm showing up on stage. But in reality, there's, if you have something that's very wrong with you and you need surgery for it, then your health is number one.
Right.
We can't be, too selfish with those ideals. Be practical. And so, Mamma Mia, they brought you back on stage for the final number.
They did.
The final night, didn't they?
They did. It was very emotional.
I bet. Man.
It was actually a matinee on a Sunday. They went
excuse me, you're right.
They went an extra day because every performance was sold out.
Yep. Mamma Mia did very well.
And so they got me in, and I watched it. So it was a very emotional experience for me. I had no idea they were going to pull me up on stage.
Okay. How did it feel? From an audience member's perspective, even though you were there for the entire rehearsal, that's a very unique perspective.
Well, I knew all the lines, so it's like I was watching Sean. It's like, is he going to do this? Can he actually do this? And of course, he had been doing it, but it was. I knew everything that was going to happen, so I was, I knew when someone was going to be coming in, and so I was constantly kind of anticipating, because it's like when you've been there for all the rehearsals, most people's lines too. I mean, not every word, but so I was like, just fingers crossed that everything was going to go okay and there weren't going to be hiccups. And it went perfectly.
Yeah. So after Mamma Mia, you finally got on stage for a part though.
Yes.
For like a nice chunky speaking part. And what was that?
It was Flown. Which Mita directed, and it's a play that's full of family secrets.
It's the last play we had done before the shutdown, right? Yep. So that's the last play that's went up here.
Right, and so I played the husband. His name is Jim. One of the lead characters, played by Teresa Rose, and I play her husband, who it's been pulled into this family drama, unwillingly, really. It just
They're all
doesn't-
gathering at the beach house, just gather the dad's ashes, and there's drama. Everybody has something going on.
A very dysfunctional childhood for these kids who had a father who was very harsh, intimidating, and really cruel in a way. And that comes out through various monologues through the play. So I had a monologue myself that I delivered near the beginning of the play. So it was exciting. I remember the stage fright the very first night, and making sure. And I have a soft voice, and trying to project and make sure that people can hear me. And it is true when you are with an audience in this building, your voice disappears once it gets past the 3 or 4 seats.
Rick actually has a very beautiful voice, and if Rick has the voice of the sergeant in the Civil War documentary that read his letter and he died in battle the next day, where this is like, kiss Annabeth for me, Private Rick Herndon, 1864. I'm just like, that's Rick's voice. And he also looks like the actor Stephen Lang. Google Stephen Lang and you'll be like, that's Rick. But I digress. So, at Flung being in that that cast of everybody was good in that cast. It features a few new people and a few newcomers and returning people. Very good performances by Teresa Rose and Nicole Braswell, I felt.
Yes.
They had a lot. Teresa in particular had a lot on her shoulders in that play, and I was
Right.
just very impressed. And
It was a pleasure to work with them. I mean, to watch Joyce Kilpatrick Jordan, she delivers a monologue, basically describing her last days with her husband who died. And I swear every night I had to work not to have tears in my eyes because she's so good at delivering this monologue and describing what it was like to take care of someone in a kind of a hospice situation who's near death. And it was so real. That for me, that was the play kind of revolved around that moment. That as bad as this person was to his children, he had to experience this terrible death through cancer and all that stuff. And people still loved him, and his wife took care of him, even though he was this type of person.
even though he had he had very
Yeah.
bad flaws. There's still how you shape somebody and the person they turn out to be. Maybe I wouldn't be this person without that type of thing.
Right.
Trauma and all, everybody has something, Now tell me, from y'all's perspective, did you guys have an inkling of what was going on with the COVID and all that? I know it's going back a ways, but did y'all, was it a thing back then? Because I remember I was doing a show at the same time too, and I don't remember it. I remember it being like an outside concern.
Yeah, it was still
New York,
overseas. And
yeah.
they were trying to keep it from coming into the country. I think when we were in rehearsals.
Whoops.
And yeah.
Yeah.
But it was because we were done in February, so March is when it sort of kicked into high gear here. So we were done before it became a thing. But yeah, I think it was just a whisper. I mean, the news wasn't even really making that big a deal. It wasn't even reporting much on it because it wasn't going to be anything that hit us.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah. To close it out, I just want to say thank you, Rick, for somehow finding us in this crazy world we live in.
It has been my pleasure.
Yes. And we thank you for coming on to the podcast and sharing your experiences, and we look forward to making many more. I appreciate you coming down and doing that bit for the Halloween special. I appreciate that. I want to do more type of stuff like that, especially if we can't do shows. I don't, I hope we can. Please, I hope we can. I hope we can do more live in-person shows. But if we can't, I'd like to do more stuff like the Halloween podcast. Some type of content trickling out of Neuse Little Theatre, I think would be a good thing.
Well, you're both doing a fabulous job.
We try.
And I've listened to all the podcasts, and they're all entertaining. I hope mine is.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. everybody has so far has had their own bring their own unique style to it as a guest. You know, there's never been one where I hasn't listened to later. I'm like, you know what, that was really good. They've all come out very well. I'm always like a 25% surprised. I'm like, oh, that was better than I thought. Good. So
it's actually been really nice because it's nice to hear other people's stories from a different perspective. Because I know my side, and you know, of you coming in, and so I know we joke about you being the new guy. We call Rick the new guy, even though he's been here forever now. But it feels like you've been here forever. I think we as a theater community do really well at accepting new people in.
Yes.
And I've been to other theaters where you don't quite feel the same.
That immediate.
Yeah.
Acceptance.
And I like to think we're kind of on the top of the pyramid and where that is concerned. I mean, occasionally you'll find somebody who doesn't quite fit.
No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, I would say you're right, because if you looked at past, and these are just how to gauge it, you know, a way to keep track. If you look at, I think it was last year's 4 to 5 Canon nominees in all the major acting categories were almost new. In the leading acting categories were new people. They were new people who had not done shows here before. So I don't think that there's a greater testament to the fact that we will accept new people. You know, it's very inclusive here, very inclusive.
Yeah, and people who come tend to stay. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very rare that we get a one and done.
Very rare. It happens, but yeah.
Well, North Carolina is very unusual from my perspective, because I grew up in rural Mississippi, and there's no community theater up unless you're in Oxford, maybe Tupelo, Jackson. But here in North Carolina, if you've got 10,000 people, you've got a theater.
Yep.
You've got Benson, you've got Four Oaks,
You got
you've got
Wilson,
Smithfield, Goals,
Fayetteville. We're talking about everything west of Raleigh, because Raleigh has like 12 to 15. You know, they're popping up. They were at one point popping up all the time, and yeah, it's just a crazy amount. You can always find somewhere to go.
It is.
Yeah, all the way down to Cape Fear. They do great stuff.
There's a few down in Wilmington.
Yeah, we went to go see Explorers Club all the way down in Wilmington, North Carolina, because we had planned to do it here soon, and we wanted to see a version of it, how it was done, and it was in this terrible neighborhood and this little 40-seat theater, and damn if they didn't rock it though. They were excellent. I was very impressed. They did an excellent job, and so there is quality theater to be had all across North Carolina.
Yes.
All across North Carolina.
And there's you could have any flavor you want. You've got very professional, like equity style, equity level performances. You have touring groups that come through, and then you have little community theaters who are varying in their talent pool, I guess. But overall, as far as if you're going to look at like as a whole, we have a very good pool of people to pull from and do so. I mean, and most of us do very good productions most of the time.
Yeah,
right.
They're not all home runs, but
we'll tell you when ours aren't.
But what makes it special too is that there's a lot of diversity in the types of plays that are put on here.
Absolutely, yes.
And not just musicals, but serious drama and things that really aren't known for people to kind of be exposed to, and like Bloom and Flung. Two very serious plays.
Yeah, show me another community theater that has 10,000, that with a town of 10,000 people, like you said, where we could do stuff like Safe, that it's like an R-rated script,
Right.
This is an adult script, or stuff like Proof, that it deals with very mature subject matters and stuff like that. Yeah, and that's one of the things I love, because I've never been the big fancy musical guy. I always like the smaller, weirder or comedic plays and stuff like that. But yeah, that's what keeps me coming back, and the people. Well, guys, we're gonna wrap it up there. We want to thank Rick for being on the show. Our next show will be up in another 2 weeks, And we want to thank Mita Toole for doing all the work here on the podcast. You're doing a great job, Mita. I'm your host and creator, Matt Gore. The music is by Cody Walker. Follow Cody Walker Music on Facebook and on YouTube. Try him out. He's a local guy, and I think he's even coming back home for Thanksgiving, so I might get to see him. We're recording this around November. This will not be released around November, so wherever you are, I hope you stay safe. Wear a mask for me. Even if it helps a little bit, it's totally worth it. Other than that, take care, and we'll talk to you next time.